Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to staying to the end for this last session of the day. I know it's been a long day, but we appreciate you staying. So, last but not least, it's still a very important session, a very important discussion we're going to be having, and we'll be very interested to hear the views of the floor and the online people. So, my name's Matt Probert. So those of you at the conference dinner last night would have seen me jump up and say a few words. I'm an academic. I'm not an RSE, but I've been heavily involved with RSEs and as a computational physicist, heavily involved with RSEs for a very long time. So we have got a few online people in the session and the panel here today. Just to say what this session is all about. This session is about what does it mean to develop the profession of Digital Research Infrastructure Professional, or DRIP. No, we won't call them DRIPs. So we have got various acronyms flying around. We've got RSEs, we've got RREs. We've talked a lot about RSEs, but there's other professionals in the room. And so one thing is we've seen good things happen with the RSE profession. Is there more still to do? But there's others in the room as well who wouldn't necessarily identify themselves as being an RSE. And what can we do to grow the profession for them as well? So that's the theme of today. So we should start, of course, by introducing the panel. So to my left.
Hello, my name's Claire. I'm the RSE Community Manager. I'm based at the University of Southampton and I'm funded by the Software Sustainability Institute. I'm also a trustee at the Society. It's a charity, Society of Research Software Engineering, and I'm also working on the conference, the RSE conference, as a sponsorship chair, which will be this September. Don't miss it.
Thank you. And on my other left.
I'm Louise Brown. I'm from the University of Nottingham. I've had a bit of a strange career path. I started out life as a mechanical engineer and moved to computer science, and then I spent a lot of years working from home as a software engineer. So the last couple of years haven't been that strange because I've just gone back to the desk that I worked at for 13 years from home, and then went back into academia 12 years ago to work on a software project. Applied for a job as I think the job advert was for a software engineer managing an open source software project. I think that was what I applied for. Then found out that I was actually a research fellow, and then ran into the age-old thing of how does this work? And then saw the call for the first round of RSE fellowships and found out that there was this community out there, and applied for one, and to my astonishment got one. When I got the call to say that I got it, I said to the guy, "Are you sure?" And basically the commitment from the University of Nottingham was that I would get a permanent post at the end. So as of the start of last year, I've been in an academic post, and I would still call myself an RSE, and so I'm still trying to work out how that actually works. How does it work to be an RSE and an academic? So that's where I am at the moment.
Thank you. And we have two people online, so we'll start with Chris.
Yep, so hi again, I'm Christopher Woods, Head of Research Software Engineering at the University of Bristol, and 10 years ago, when RSE was just beginning to be created as a word, as a term, I would never have believed that now today I would be a head of research software engineering, a horse, and it's just fantastic that this profession was created, and I think it's so important that we do the same thing for all of the other DRI professions that we have available, that are really important as well.
Thank you. And Jeremy.
Hi there, I'm Jeremy Cohen. I'm an EPSRC RSE Fellow and also Director of RSE Strategy at Imperial College London. I'm a computer scientist by background, and for quite a long time I was working as a software engineer and then a researcher within the research community, doing a lot of kind of multidisciplinary projects. And I guess I've always been an RSE, perhaps without initially knowing it, and in fact that before the term even had been coined. And as Chris said, it's been fantastic how this has developed, and it's certainly made a huge difference to my career and the opportunities that I've had with the development of RSE.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. So you'll have seen, but when you hear the introductions, there's a variety of different labels we use for ourselves. And the question is, of course, is how recognizable are those labels outside of our immediate environment? So Opening question, a simple one. I'll start with Louise. If you ring up your insurance agency and you want to get your car insured or your house insured, and they ask you, "What's your profession?" what do you say to them?
Since the start of last year, it's been university lecturer.
Okay, before then.
Before then, it would have been engineer probably. So, yeah, either software engineer or mechanical engineer, depending on, normally on what was available in the drop-down box.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Claire?
So, as I said, obviously I'm not an RSC, and the term community manager is much more well known now, but or the last couple of years, but it wasn't before. So I did find myself having to explain it to family and friends. And in research, it's also known as the scientific engagement manager, and there are many different labels as well. And it has its own community, so you have to explain what the job does and networking and all those things.
And the insurance agency, they accept that?
No, in those cases I just go straight to admin.
Okay.
There's nothing else you can tell them.
Yeah. Chris, what do you tell your insurance agency?
I say research software engineer, and ironically, this is easier than saying postdoc. And for years, before I became a research software engineer, when I was saying postdoc in meetings and things, there was a lack of understanding. It's always with your family. What are you doing? Are you still studying? Are you still doing this? You're kind of in this halfway place. And then suddenly it's, I'm a research software engineer. And that means, oh, software engineer, you must be doing something great, and research sounds nice. And now I'm a head of research software engineering. It's like, oh, you're ahead of something. That sounds even more important than everything else. So I'd say getting the name was so important, because postdoc for me is a name which is like, it doesn't mean anything. It's like, well, it's the thing you do after you got your doctorate. And I think that's actually the thing that was the most important thing.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And Jeremy, what do you say when you're...
So I think I've always officially been either one or other half, or it's not in fact half, but one or other part of research software engineer. So either software engineer or researcher as my kind of official role. And in fact, for many years now, I've officially been classed as a researcher. And I guess I'm more at the research end, perhaps, of the research software engineer role, if you consider it sort of as a scale between researcher and a sort of professional software engineer. So kind of probably at the moment, I mean, as much as I class myself as an RSE, I'm more researcher than I am software engineer in my current kind of role.
Okay, so some labels are easier to explain to people outside of the community. So maybe we should start with the online people for the next question. Is what do you think is different about your role from other IT professionals? I mean, the world has kind of heard of IT and it's heard of IT professionals. How would you say what you do is different from an IT professional, the sort of thing that the insurance company might be expecting if you had said that kind of label? We'll start with Jeremy.
So I guess, I mean, I in some ways, you know, I accept a lot of what I do is probably quite similar to what IT professionals do. But I think, as I just mentioned, because I kind of feel I'm more at that sort of research end of the scale, I guess what I'm doing that's different is the perhaps parts of a researcher's role that IT professionals wouldn't so commonly do. And that involves quite a bit of writing grants, to some extent writing papers, often disseminating information through other means such as blog posts and other kind of written documents that perhaps are more towards that kind of researchy side of things. Although, of course, IT professionals do a lot of, or can do a lot of writing reports. We heard in the earlier panels about people writing strategic plans and so on. But yeah, I think those kind of traditional research tasks around the kind of paper writing and the grant writing and looking for funding and a lot of the kind of engagement and collaboration in sort of collaborative projects and tasks is perhaps more the stuff that's more towards the research side than what maybe perhaps IT professionals are familiar with doing on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. Chris, what would you say, Chris?
So I'd say partly the same thing sort of on the research side, but the other thing I'm experiencing now is that the job is turning into management. And I think regardless if you're in IT or in your academia or you're in professional services or you're working in a business, as you progress up, all jobs become management. And so everything just it doesn't matter actually what the job title is or how you got it, everything becomes management.
Do you ever still do RSE yourself, or is it all done through other people?
I still hold on, like gripped tightly to the bits of RSE that I can still do myself, and it will take me a long time before I let it go. This is one of the reasons I have not applied to be the director at Bristol, because then I'd stop being an RSA. And that for me is the great challenge, actually, is sort of how do you still retain that technical side while going upwards, because everything leads to management.
Okay, interesting. Claire, what would you say?
Oh, much the same as Jeremy and Chris. It's about the research side of things, and writing grants and the proposal and the posters. I imagine that's different to IT professionals. And working much closer with the researchers to figure out which software to go for and having that knowledge of which tool to use.
Okay. Yeah. And Louise?
I think for me, certainly when I was purely an RSE, I think the big difference is that I would also have classified myself as an engineer, as a mechanical engineer or as a composites researcher, so very much focused on the particular project, on the textiles modelling, the textile composites modelling, and working with researchers and working out what I needed to be developing in order to facilitate the composites research. So, and I think that's completely different to most IT professionals. Now my issue is how do I retain that while I've got 18 2Ts and 5 project students and getting that balance. I did have an afternoon on, what day did I come here? Wednesday. On Tuesday I spent an afternoon in my happy place writing software. So so I did manage to carve out a bit, but that's the sort of balancing act at the moment, I think. And that, I guess that's very different to most IT professionals.
Okay, so there seems to be a bit of a consensus that it's the research side of things. I think the people who've got on the panel here are mostly on the RSE side of things, but I'd be interested to hear from the floor, people who've got thoughts about what differentiates your role as a DRI professional from an IT professional. Mark, go on.
So I was just going to say, I think maybe there's an opportunity in the same way that the RSE community came together and defined the term, maybe there's an opportunity for actually carving out a difference for progression in the RSE community and others, where getting to senior management almost requires maintaining a connection with the research side.
Yeah.
It's something that, so for example, in DRI, the management, you know, we're all there's academics involved in all the management, and you know we keep a foot in the research community as well, because that link between the facility and the research community is vital. I think with the RSE community, it's equally vital, and you know the same with the other DRI professionals. So I think maybe it's something that can be thought about, that rather than just assuming that, as was said, everything leads to management, and that automatically means once you go above a certain level, you will lose connection with the community. Maybe now we can say, well, you don't have to. Maybe, but how we do that, I don't know. But given that this community didn't exist as a community 10 years ago, it feels like there's an opportunity to define how it evolves higher up as well.
I think it's a very interesting comment.
I was just going to say, for me, I very much need to keep in contact with the composites research community, because basically funding for TextGen, the software that I work on, is going to come on the back of collaborations with composites research proposals. So they will identify a need for some modelling to go alongside the experimental stuff, and my funding for TextGen now is going to come through that route, I think. So it definitely need to keep in touch with the research community.
Yeah, as an academic, I can certainly say that as I have progressed at the Greasy Pole, the amount of management has gone up, but you still have to keep the research and teaching going. And so maybe there is scope within the RSE profession too to keep those. We have a new member of the panel. Excellent. To keep those different balance those different things going. So anyway, the question was to the floor. People in your day jobs, how would you say what's different, or what you do compared to what an IT professional does? I think there's a question.
So, I just wanted to follow up sort of on the previous one, I'm sorry, but is that academic career progression commonly doesn't work, or definitely doesn't work the same way that it often does in professional services, where is that the only way to progress up with titles and potential salary increases and whatnot means that someone else has to leave, rather than general promotion aspects. And is that there are existing structures, whether you're doing networking, system maintenance, facilities, those sorts of situations. So I think just in general, we hear commonly polling from the academic research side need to spend some time talking to our facilities brethren and get a sense of, okay, because they have their own, whether it's trade unions, existing, societies and such, to see, where is our overlap. We ought to not define, IT for them, because they already have definitions, but is that I think there's definitely some worthwhile conversations that can go on with explicitly professional services regarding the questions of career progression that isn't from an academic track.
I think I can say something about the difference of IT people from scientists or researchers. When I was involved in IT, I usually had in my daily tickets to solve specific problems, incidents, requests, based on always in ITIL, no? ITIL, like the standards. But now, if you give me a topic to do research, and I have no idea of what is involved, one topic, and then the next day you discover, oh, this is another. So this is, for me right now, it's quite difficult to say, okay, I'm going to present this in 2-3 days, because every day I'm discovering something new concepts. And it's not only about computational background, it's also involved physics or maths, even chemistry. I mean, every day for me is a new start. I feel like I know many things. I think, in summary, I can say IT, specifically a specialization in your task. Okay, I'm gonna do backups, I'm gonna do something operational. But in the other way, researching, you are discovering, you are creating knowledge, you are mixing up. So I think that's the basic difference for me. I don't know if I'm right.
Okay, thank you. And Alan.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of comment on this. I've worked in IT organizations where you feel like basically someone has to leave and then you apply for their job, because it's really been predefined what the roles are that are necessary for kind of carrying off that particular service, and then there's restructures happen and things. It's all kind of, the whole career structure is kind of done to you in many ways. But I feel certainly kind of what we're trying to do within the research computing unit, it's often recognizing that the people in it are actually really creating their own opportunities for progression. This whole idea that, actually, that the jobs become a thing, and they don't, you've maybe got to obliterate their old job and put a new job in, but it's because that person has actually transformed and developed in that role to something that is actually got a greater kind of impact and criticality to the organization's reputation. And if you can play those stories back, the university kind of understands reputation and contribution to it, and it's kind of just providing evidence into that, But unfortunately, you end up in a situation where the job doesn't exist there for you to aspire to it, although kind of invented this event to kind of give you some ideas of what that might look like, but that journey is up to you. But you kind of get doing the job, and then somebody's going to say, this is really important, it needs to be really valued in the right way. Unfortunately, that's the tension that we've got within some of these DRI roles.
Can I come in on that?
Yeah, and I think some online questions or comments too. Marion, do you want to?
Do I?
Oh, I thought you were doing the online.
Yeah, I'm doing the online,
Yeah.
but Chris wanted to add something to what.
Sorry, go on, Chris.
So I think what Alan said is really insightful. I think there's a difference between the academic side and the professional services side, and RSE came partly through the academic side, because as an academic you have this freedom to almost create your job, and you create your job by applying for grants and then becoming the expert in X, and you effectively get to a level as an academic where you create the job you become, and you're almost writing your own job description. So Louise effectively going and becoming the person who looks after tech gen, and it's a massively important thing for the UK and can build a career on that. I did the same thing with effectively building RSE on the academic side, then moving it into the professional services side in Bristol and writing my own job descriptions, head of RSE. And that's a freedom that academics, I think, take for granted. On the professional services side, you don't get this ability to be an entrepreneur effectively. You know, academics are entrepreneurs. In professional services, you rarely get that ability to be an entrepreneur and to raise the money and to create the positions that you can then aspire to be promoted into. And you are in this very rigid services kind of mindset. And I think if there's one thing that the RSE movement, I think it was the DRI movement, are always trying to sort of push against, is this fact of being classified as pure professional services that are working against a ticketing system and are replaceable cogs in a machine for a set number of roles, and then you have to kind of apply for management positions as you move upwards. I think if we're going to advance the DRI side, the other professions, we need to provide routes by which they can have the similar levels of entrepreneurship rewarded by enabling them to create the career tracks and write the job descriptions for themselves to be promoted into.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, I think we're on a level track there. So, Marion, I think there's some online, then we'll come to Phil.
Yes, first of all, there's a comment and then there's a question. So Paul says, much of my role involves DRI activities such as supporting HPC, but I am employed as a computing technician within a school. We have no central DRI support at my university. And then we've got a question from Toby asking, does the role of RSE and RIE overlap and are interchangeable? How would someone get into a role as an infrastructure engineer?
Very interesting question. So I don't think we've got any RIEs or people who identify as RIEs appear in the panel. So any RIEs in the audience want to comment on that? Between an RIE and an RSE? Chap at the back.
Yeah, so I've just hopped across the boundary recently. So I've spent 3 years working as an RSE, and I've just hopped over to the infrastructure side. So there are different constraints, because often the RSEs are working on projects, whereas more often on the infrastructure side you are providing a service. And so there are obviously the different competing requirements from that. But in terms of the actual job role, it requires similar sorts of skills, the inventive, problem solving, all of this sort of thing. So I think you can move between them, and I think there's a real benefit to having people on these different teams with different ideas. So I've been able to bring, I've got so much to learn about, infrastructure that I know very little about. But also I can bring in some software engineering stuff that maybe the rest of the team haven't. So it can be beneficial, I think, to have a bit of both.
Thank you. Yeah, Mark, do you have a comment on that?
I think there was another question.
Yeah, there's another question, but we had a comment on what's been said before we go to the other question.
It's related. No, go to the other question.
Okay, right. Phil.
It's not exactly another question. I think I was following up from the comment about academic freedom and entrepreneurship and promotion. I think universities are often very poor at recognizing any non-academic excellence. Even at the level of administrative promotion, people get promoted when they create teams and head teams, regardless of whether a team is the right thing for that role, hence multiplication of certain teams. And if there's an opportunity, I would, if possible, I would like to see people on maybe the professional services structure rewarded for what they do, not forcing them to have the freedom to be entrepreneurs, to create something else. Not that that should be banned, but just that there need to be other ways of recognizing excellence, and that maybe it's part of writing job descriptions that you can obviously exceed and show that you've exceeded that expectation. Maybe when we create roles, we need to think about what is, what are you expected to perform at, in the sense of you can then demonstrate when you're exceeding that, and mechanisms for for rewarding that without necessarily fundamentally changing your role. If that's not what you want to do, it's not what you're good at.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good points there. Question? Comment?
Question, more like a comment. I'm really liking the points that are coming up and the discussions that's happening now, and I think it's showing real insight into the topic. The point I'd like to make is I don't think it's helpful to compare DRI or research computing jobs with IT. Mm-hmm. I don't believe there are many parallels between those at all. So, it's different software, it's different methodologies, it's different ethos, different customers at the end of it. So I would suggest we just put the IT thing completely out of our minds and do what we want to do for the different roles within a research-orientated computing environment.
I think I certainly agree with that. Mark?
Yeah, so I have a comment, but it's related to that and the previous comment and something that Chris said. So one obvious difference between, in the university's mind, professional services and academics is the ref. And while I wouldn't wish the ref on anyone, is that a way should we be looking for some way to make let's say, DRI professionals refable?
Yeah.
Because that would achieve two things. And as I say, I'm not saying that this is not an argument in favor of the ref, it's just the game that's there at the moment. But it would mean the universities would understand how to promote someone along a route, because they can do that for refable activities. And it also then almost goes back to what Chris was saying about the things that make it distinct from from professional services are kind of built in, because if you're refable, then by definition you have to be, you would be able to argue, you can't force me to stick to a job description and not have any freedom if you want me to be as creative enough to be refable.
I think that's an excellent solution, and as you say, I wouldn't wish ref on anyone, but I think we are coming.
What is ref?
The Research Excellence Framework. It's every 5 or 6 years. It's a universities-wide, all disciplines-wide assessment of the research excellence of a department, and individual researchers within that department contribute to an overall score. Use of ranking used to determine the standing financial contribution to the university from HEFKE for the research component. So there's a lot of money at stake. So yes, I think we're getting quite clear that DRI and IT professionals, we shouldn't mention in the same breath, they're quite different. We need to think about how we can develop the career of DRI professionals in a way that is not the same as IT professionals, and the criteria for promotion. I was very interested to hear James Hetherington say yesterday he's got job descriptions up to grade 10, professorial grade for the RSE profession within UCL. I asked him to send them to me, and I think it's up to us, if we're kind of creating these kind of grades and getting these things into our organisations, as we think about what the DRI profession looks like, to think what the promotion path would look like, and can we put in job descriptors and hero role descriptors that don't involve excessive amounts of management in order to progress. Marion, some more from online?
Yes, there's a question online. Does the fact that many RSEs are PhD holders allow a degree of escape from the support stereotypes and constraints, or can that fact be leveraged better?
So the fact that they got a PhD?
Yes.
Okay. I don't see the connection, but go on. Yeah.
I would answer that with lots of our PS staff have a PhD, and
Yes.
so I mean, probably most of them do have a PhD.
I mean, if I could answer that as well, I think
Yeah, Chris?
it's not that you've got the PhD, it's you have that research experience. So when you go into the room, I am a peer. You know, I am a researcher as well. I know exactly how the system works for you. I've been in the same position. I've tried to raise money. I've tried to do things like you. And that gives you you're treated differently. I mean, to be blunt, academics are very snobbish. And if you walk into a room as a support technician or member of professional services, you do have academics that treat you completely differently than if you walk into the room as I have a PhD, I have a research background, and you become a peer, a member of the team, rather than a drain or a service that is going to be used that way. And I think that part of making DRI professions work is actually elevating to the point where they're viewed as peers and they're treated as peers, and we get rid of this academic snobbery.
Yeah, I understand that. Jeremy, what do you think?
So, I mean, I think I agree with the points being made so far, but I think also the current, I mean, the kind of points that Chris has made are more, I think, a symptom of a problem with the current system, and it's something that it's a big challenge to resolve. And I think a lot of that is because we've talked quite a bit about this idea of the research route or the professional services route, and much of the activity that RSEs and other DRI professionals do falls kind of somewhere in the middle of those two. And there isn't an easy way to resolve that. So you either get pulled towards one or the other route. And, I think the comments made before, I think it was Simon who made the comment about, we should sort of disconnect the IT, the sort of standard IT setup from the DRI side of things. I mean, I agree with that, but I think the problem of this being pulled kind of one way or the other is that if you get pulled towards the professional services side, you almost certainly, although there are institutions now that are making a big change to this, you get pulled into something which is effectively central IT potentially. And even if you're doing a different role, you at some level are part of that kind of side of things. And it's not to say that solutions can't be found in these kind of structures, but I think that these structures have not been developed. They probably developed over many years to support a particular way of doing things, and making that change and making it fit for the kind of DRI roles that we're talking about that have a very different kind of focus and perhaps a different long-term aim, beyond purely running enterprise IT or running sort of ticketing setups to deal with challenges and problems that you have and so on. It's quite I think the current systems just don't support that well, and we are seeing people doing things to change that and trying to change that. But I think there's still a lot of different things that we probably need to try, and there's probably a little way to go for this to be something that's accepted more widely.
Do you think we've had?
There's a question over there.
Oh, yeah, okay, we have a question over here, or comment over here. Yeah.
It's more or less comment about the excellence and the recognition of the profession and its of the RSE profession and RIE and its relation with the academics. So the academic career path is mainly, the progression in it is mainly defined by the RAF, and the RAF usually looks at the journal papers or prestigious conference papers, and recently they have added the engagement and outreach activities. But I feel like if we want the RSE and RIE to have an established profession and work well with the academics, then the academics needs to be recognized for caring about the research software they produce out of the research. So there could be a kind of established connection between both of them. Similarly, like academics, when they work in interdisciplinary research, they are not recognized within their school, but it's important. Recently UKRI and EPSRC started to take care of the interdisciplinary research project, but yet we have to go back and make some research related back to our school so that we can get progressed. So I think, I feel like when we are here, if we make the academics recognized for producing the research activities, what I have seen also is that some academics write, when they produce very good research software, they put it in the impact and the outreach activities, but they can't put it as a standalone thing to be recognized for as part of their excellence.
That's a very good comment. Phil, I think you had some information on that one.
I'm not sure it's information. I mean, this is a subject very close to my heart, and many RSEs, I'm sure, spend all our time doing research outputs that it's very hard to know how they will be assessed by ref. Software is refable. I think in the last ref there was basically, well, I don't mean the one that's, the jury's out, the one before that was published, there weren't really any. And if you go to computer science, where you might imagine, surely that's what they know, there's a paper for every bit of software, and the paper goes in, and that's the accepted route. I think we need to change that. I don't know how we change that, but I think that needs to happen. People like Simon Hetrick at Southampton are very keen on that. One thing that occurred to me earlier is we've got Billy here from EPSRC. We talk with him all the time. We don't have anyone from Research England. And maybe we should think about the people who actually run REF and bringing them.
Good comment. Yeah.
Sorry, back again. There are, two initiatives that I would like to mention here. One of them is the Journal of Statistical Software. They are accepting a lot of interdisciplinary software things, so this could be one venue, and it just started soon, to the best of my knowledge. And the other thing is that back from my computer science background, IEEE and SEM started an initiative to have, each journal paper have its software associated with it, and it has a kind of something like the ISBN, but it's associated with the paper. Yeah.
Yeah, so just to pick up the point about promotion and outputs and what's recognised, in the standard academic panel, as you said, it's things like papers and conference talks. And one thing that we've been arguing about in York, and we've got accepted, is that if an RSE goes up the academic career path, then things like their software outputs, and instead of having citations, it's maybe the number of downloads. They put their software on GitHub or something like that. You could use that as a comparable metric to papers and to citations. And we've had that accepted. We've had one RSE promoted through that route. So there are ways of doing it, but you've got to get buy-in from the promotions board and from the HR route to get those recognitions there. So there are ways around it, but you have to fight every fight and get that thing. And it requires people who are shouting for your corner, who have connections and can have influence in your institution. There is no universal path for this, and I think that's something to come on to in a second. Anybody else? Mark?
So a couple of quick comments. So just following up on what you said, there's a new journal from the Royal Astronomical Society as well. So it's Royal Astronomical Society Techniques and Instruments, and they're including in that software and HPC related papers as well. So that's a new journal, just started very recently as well. So there's more opportunities. The other thing is about engaging with Research England. I think that's a good idea. I think we should be doing that urgently, because I believe discussions about what's going to be in the next ref are happening right now. Yeah. And there's a few things. So in the UKRI science case for supercomputing, we actually included we had a section on the science of computing. So essentially all the interdisciplinary algorithm development and co-design work and all the things that are done by the DRI community, and actually proposed that there needs to be a ref unit for that type of work that's distinct from computer science or any of the individual research fields, but actually recognizes that, designing an HPC system and the software ecosystem around it is an it is an activity in itself. It's a research activity that requires a whole lot of different inputs. So maybe now is the time to start pushing that as a unit in the next ref.
Certainly, if REF did accept that as a unit of assessment, then that would be a big lever on the universities to recognise and act. So these kind of external influences do have a big impact. Do you want to say something?
I was just going to say, so thinking about the journals that go alongside papers, so in engineering there's Journal of Advances in Engineering Software, I think it is, but I wonder whether there needs to be some sort of activity in, if you've got a publication in one of those journals, whether there's some sort of assessment of the software as well, whether it gets sort of more weighting, because because it's probably not going to be such a high impact factor journal as its composite structures or whatever. So is there some sort of work to be done around how those software journal papers are assessed?
Do you want to say something?
Yes, I was going to agree with Phil of how universities aren't great at promoting any non-academic roles. Quite often at my university you see an announcement come out saying staff promotion round, and you click on it thinking, great, I'm staff. No, you're not staff. So, and it's very, very difficult to get promoted in professional services, regrading or being promoted, forget it. It's better to leave and come back, or go for a whole new role. So yeah, it's definitely, I completely agree with that. It's not good for if you can keep any of your DRI roles out of professional services into a different job family, I would completely definitely recommend that.
I know we have some members of the audience here who are DRI professionals, but not in the universities. So I'd be interested to know if the promotion path is different in AEA or the Met Office or other people here. Does anyone of those have a...
That's exactly what I was about to bring up. So yeah, I was going to say, obviously with this audience, it makes sense to keep it proportional to talk about universities a lot, but RSE as a profession doesn't just mean how is it recognised within universities. Professions need other things to define them. So at UKAEA, we are, in terms of like pay structure, we're bound by the same rules as civil servants currently. It's something that's under review and will hopefully change, hopefully very soon, because various science ministers always accept that, especially in the case of UKAEA and presumably the Met Office as well, we're employing specialists, not generalists like civil servants in Whitehall, for example. But yeah, so in terms of pay bands and stuff, we're bound by that. But then one of the things that the executive at UKAEA are very keen to promote is technical progression. So trying to find ways to kind of go up through the grades without necessarily having to converge to a manager, as we were discussing earlier. So recognizing technical excellence. So if you're a specialist in the field of, we've got one guy that's particularly active in cloud computing, for example, and others that look at kind of GPU exploitation, and it's kind of recognizing specialisms like that. They're trying to promote that as a way to rise up through ranks, but still, I mean, when they talk about that, personally, sometimes I feel a bit skeptical because, okay, that gets you so far, but eventually you still just need to become a manager. You still need to manage people. To become like a department head, for example, I still think there's not really room at the top for technical specialists. But my question was going to be, what else, aside from things that are university specific, do we need to look at in terms of developing RSE as a profession?
Excellent. That's the next question on the list. Should we start with the online people? Jeremy, what else do we need to do to develop RSE or DRI professions?
So, I mean, I come back to something I was talking about in the previous panel, which was the community aspect. And I think that again, that's something which, it's all very well having options for careers and places for people to kind of fit in, for their roles to fit in. But I think beyond that, you need to build a community around these roles and around the different areas of work that people are doing. And I think that's hugely important in ensuring that you are able to give some kind of, give some kind of structure to the way that the roles fit into the environment that people are based. So in research, we kind of have, in the research environment, we have natural communities around things like conferences. So you have areas where a conference for a particular area will be somewhere that many people from that domain gather perhaps each year to discuss things. And I think in the kind of research infrastructure space, we've been less, I guess we're less likely to have these kind of things. So particularly, obviously, the RSE community has been a hugely important development over the last decade. And I guess we see things around things like HPC SIG and other areas like this where there are communities, but I think that those can be developed a lot more. And I think that providing not just the existence of the community, but providing active engagement opportunities through events, through conferences, through workshops, and giving people that opportunity to talk about what they're doing, to learn from others, and so on, is really important in giving kind of more of a structure to the roles and showing that where the roles fit in. And then you can build from those communities out into the other communities, like the academic community and more of the sort of IT side of things, to give you the kind of positioning of the roles and the structures and a better understanding of where everything fits.
Thank you. Marion, you got a comment from online on that?
No, I was actually following up from. I would like to follow up from that. So I think a huge difference is to have basically one person to look after a community, like Claire does for the RSE community. And I would like to ask Claire a bit more about. About this role as a community manager and how this has developed, because I've seen over the past year several community management positions coming up, and I think that was also not something that I've seen before.
Yeah, I agree. A very new development is our own community of community managers online, CSCCE, and there are people joining every day. So this role is really exploding, also called Scientific Engagement Manager. And it's usually people, much like RSEs, who have started in a PhD and realised that actually they'd like to move slightly into more of a community role. Obviously RSEs realised during their PhD they prefer doing the programming. So the role is so varied that the studies are still being done about all the different parts of the skills wheel, basically, and all the different things you can do. The community, the conferencing and the events and networking and building networks within networks and making everybody know each other and helping with grant writing, and there's so much to do.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
How did you get this role to exist?
Good follow-up, yes.
So how did I get into this role?
How did you get this role, and how did you get the role to be created?
So I started as network administrator in 2016, and then when the SSI grant was renewed, my line manager and I realised that this role fits more into community manager and what that role was being developed. So we literally wrote the role for myself and said, let's add all those skills, let's do all those things, let's step it up from network administrator.
And then others have seen it and created the same role in other communities.
Yeah. That's right.
So is that the answer, writing it into applications for funding? So if you're doing an application which includes a community, ask for the money to have a person to manage that and to facilitate that. I don't know if that's a possibility.
Okay. Chris, what's your view on that?
Well, this is what I mean by the entrepreneurship, the freedom that academics have. They get to create job descriptions and job roles by adding them into grants. On the question of what do you need to create a community or create a profession, I think what you need is peer recognition. And the recognition is not just that it exists, but how it's metricated, how you assess it. So we've had a lot of talk about, if only we could put software into REF, wouldn't that be great? But the reality is most RSEs and DRI professionals are not refable, as we said at the beginning. So as an anecdote, there is a great sysadmin at Bristol who ended up being a co-author on a Nature paper many years ago. And for him, it was like, I'm a co-author on a Nature paper, that's fine. For an academic, that'd be, I'm on a co-author on a Nature paper, this is amazing, because it meant a lot to the academic. They get recognition for it. But you know, for a sysadmin, it doesn't matter. It's not even listed. It's like an anecdote. And this is what I mean by recognition. A profession has to either say, this is who we are, and this is how we should be recognized, and this is how you judge us and you evaluate us, and this is what's good and this is what's bad. Or it has to somehow persuade its peers that it works with to say, this is the profession, and this is what's good and this is what's bad. And I think we're in this kind of world where we're afraid as DRI professionals, because we're trapped between professional services and academia, that we're either trying to jump into the let's all be refable world, or we're trying to jump into the professional services very weird world, as I'm learning. And I think we need the bravery to actually stand up and say, actually, we're massively valuable. The academic community massively need us. And this is how we should be judged. And we need our academic colleagues and our other people of power to say, yes, this is who you are and this is how we'll judge you.
Thank you.
Just to, I guess just to push back into infrastructure of the DRI space, is that throughout this meeting, we've talked a lot about specifically compute or end user software. There's a lot of other, and my particular interest and specialty is cluster computing, but is that there's a lot of other infrastructure that goes on storage, network, software infrastructure to make everything run, whether that's, you know, managing machines, batch scheduling, is that these are other aspects of the, you know, skill set, not necessarily of the same person, but of DRIs that also needs to get attention and recognition, and, you know, experts in, you know, high throughput digital networking. It is those who can manage those forever frustrating Lustre storage systems properly. Is that those who say write and support open source software when it comes to middleware are all incredibly important in this overall research computing community. And I think those, you know, ought to be at least in our mind when talking about it, and not necessarily just compute hardware.
Sure. So we have been talking about, trying to talk about DRI professionals, not just RSEs, but a more general class of people, and that's a good comment. Yeah. At the front here.
Yeah. So to respond to what Chris was saying, he was like still framing it in the terms of how to get DRI professionals, RSEs, recognized as valuable to academia, but really trying to bring us out of that. So maybe going even beyond Met Office and UKAA. So talking about DRI professionals and RSEs in industry, right? So they're not judged on paper output. Yeah, some papers come out of private companies from time to time, but they have R&D departments where they're judged on whether or not they develop something that can generate profit. So professions need to exist outside of academia as well. So what else is there that we need to talk about? And are we even the right people to talk about it just as we are? Do we need to include industry more in events like these to get that perspective?
And we have a thought or a comment? Before we go on to the, will you have a question or a comment on what's just been said?
A comment.
Okay, go on. Give your comment. You got the microphone, and then we'll go back to the panel.
Okay, so I'm going back to the wide range of professions and include them all within our community. So the thing is that, I mean, computer science people, unfortunately, they are excluded from doing the research on HPC facilities. I mean, personally, I had 2 experiences that were not good. I mean, because computer science people needs to kind of have access to do configuration and all these stuff on HPC, and we can't get these. We were told that you can use it, but you can't have like the upper hand to play with the configuration and change it. And this is the core of the computer science research. And the other thing that, I mean, computer science people, one of the main disciplines within it is software engineering, and we were discussing this earlier. We're not included to help with the software engineering process, while this is core of the science itself. And yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good comment. And
can I just comment on?
Yeah.
So, in response to the bit about being able to play with the things, get in touch with Excalibur, because the whole point of the test beds within Excalibur is that all various communities across UKRI would be able to do what they need to do. So there's definitely scope, and within all the planning around Excalibur, computer science is part of the thinking of it. So being able to work with the tech support teams to be able to reconfigure is part of the purpose of the test bed. So we can have a chat offline about it, but I'd encourage anyone who would like to have that kind of access to discuss with Excalibur. The other thing is, I guess, a question, and maybe this is a question for over dinner instead, but the discussion was, we want to broaden it out so that it's all DRI professionals. I think the majority of people, my impression is the majority of people at this meeting here this week have been from the RSE community. So there are people from other communities, but there's something in that, it feels like, because this was open to everybody. The RSE community obviously does exist as a community, but what can be done to encourage the other sets of DRI professionals to engage in something like this and then progress to discussion? Because it feels like this is a good forum for having these kind of discussions, and then maybe seeding the same things that Chris and others did and that you were doing and building up the RSE community, do the same thing in another community.
I think that's an excellent question, and I think it's going to take a little bit longer than we have left to deal with. So it has just got to 6 o'clock, and Nick has been waving me to say time's up. So I think we should keep that question in mind as we depart for dinner. I hope you are able to join us for dinner and discuss that some more. I'd like to say thank you to the panel, thank you to Jeremy and Chris who are online, and to Claire, Louise and Mark for joining me here on the stage. And thank you for staying to the end of the day. Thank you.